Hello, everyone, and welcome to the International Interprofessional Mentorship Meeting. I am Dr. Kate Barlow, the founder of the program and your host for today's meeting. It's October 6, 2020, and today Tina Weisman is here to talk about pediatric NDT. Please mute yourselves during the presentation and unmute yourself whenever you would like to ask a question. You can also type your questions into the chat box and I will ask them for you. In order to receive a certificate of attendance, please enter your name and email into the chat box now, and you will need to remain on the webinar until the presenter is finished. At the conclusion of the presentation, we will have an optional meet and greet. Thank you all for coming today, and let's get started. Thank you so much, Tina, for coming. I appreciate it.
Thank you for allowing me to present. I'm honored to be here. We're going to be talking about NDT principles of handling and facilitation. I will tell you just a little bit about myself. I put that all in there for your biography, but I've been a pediatric NDT therapist for decades now. And I became an NDTA qualified OT instructor in the early 90s. And at that time, for about 10, 12 years, I was doing 8-week courses, teaching 8-week courses pretty regularly at my facility. We were running them every other year. And so I was teaching 8 weeks with the CI. I primarily taught with Joan Moore, who's an internationally renowned instructor in both adult hemiplegia and pediatrics. So I was very fortunate, and I really got to take the 8-week class and teach the 8-week class on a regular basis. Since then, I am no longer an NDTA instructor due to life. I've changed that affiliation, but I'm continuing to teach workshops and in-services. I do a lot of staff training, and I am a supervisor at a local cerebral palsy clinic school for children that have moderate to profound neuromotor impairments, sorry. And I am a doctorate student at American International College, and I graduated in May, thank goodness. Okay, so I'll tell you a little bit about the Bobaths. Bertie and Carl, and that's the picture you saw before, was Dr. Carl and Bertie Bobath, who were the founders of NDT. And Bertie Bobath really kind of, she started out as a remedial gym teacher and then became a physical therapist. And she has a whole story about how she treated an adult, a person who had a CVA, and his right arm was his dominant arm and was the affected arm, and he was an artist. She was asked to treat him, and she started to use her work as a remedial phys ed teacher and just started moving. I'm going to use the old terminology here, but she started moving the limb in more normal movement patterns. And that just got her going. And her husband was a neuropsychiatrist who did not believe a word she was saying. And she's like, listen, I'm changing spasticity. And he's like, yeah, no, you can't do that. And he came in and he watched her treat. And then at that time, they developed the Bobath concept based on the neurophysiology that was available at the time. I encourage you today to know that we continue to teach and treat with the neurophysiology that's current to this time. It's a clinical approach, and we look at the neuroscientists to explain why it works. And as we understand more neurology, we understand more why the clinical techniques that we have been doing and changing and employing continue to work. The ultimate goal is for the person to achieve motor efficiency, their highest level of motor efficiency in whatever functional skills that are desirable to them. Mrs. Bobath, she taught like an OT. You listen to her, you listen to the things she said. I was fortunate to be trained by Joan Moore, who was trained by her. She thought like an OT. So for me, OT and NDT were a natural, a natural marriage. And I really did always feel that OT brought to NDT the gift of task analysis and activity analysis and sensory motor analysis. And you couple that with NDT's gift of movement analysis. And it was just a seamless marriage. And that's me treating a little girl at my facility. And we could talk a little bit more about the handling later, but she has severe athetosis with spasticity. And currently, she could extend back where her shoulders basically touch the back of her hips. No kidding. But she's a delight. Okay. So I will tell you a little bit about NDT. Bertie Bobath was also a sculptor. So when you look at this baby picture, she sculpted that. So her hands, the way she touched, the way she facilitated, you know, I never felt her touch, but I've heard that it was, facilitation was like a dance with her. So what is taught is, how do you teach, how do you facilitate where you're not just pushing someone through movements and they're as actively involved in the transitional movements as possible during activities that are meaningful to them. So OT also brought into NDT the concept of sensory motor approach and tactile touch and deep touch, and together, Bertie Bobath did learn a lot from Maggie Knott and Jean Ayres, and developed a approach that really was based on typical development. Today, we do not go through the developmental sequence. We do not believe that you have to go from supine to kneel to half kneel to stand. We believe that if a person's not standing, we look at the movement components that are missing and what is it that we could do to help them gain that level, that higher level of postural control. So this is some slides. This is very special. Note that these slides are not available to everybody. Joan Moore gave them as a courtesy. And these are just some slides of Bertie Bobath treating a child with spastic diplegia. But it is a hands-on approach. And the idea of movement components and analyzing movement components, I know a lot of OT shy away from that, and speech therapists as well, Maggie, and we shouldn't. Because in order for us to gain the distal functional control that you need for fine motor dexterity, for example, or for feeding, for example, or articulation, you can't do that without having good biomechanical alignment of the head, neck, and trunk. You just can't. So in order for us to really have the refinement of doing mature, more mature grasp patterns and controlling our environment in our highest level, we have to look at what's missing and what we could do to get there. And all of our handling is done in biomechanical alignment. You'll hear me say a lot about biomechanical alignment. So regardless of what your background is, if you don't have a lot of information on biomechanical alignment, find yourself a colleague that does. Start talking to them, start, treating next to them or asking them questions, and it'll make sense to you. If you're facilitating something out of alignment, you're not doing anything that's going to provide the motor memory that they need to be able to transition into functional movements. Okay, I have to move you guys. So initiation movement, I talk a lot about initiation of movement. So this slide is kind of what I will talk about. If I have someone for a day with me and I have to teach them one gift for NDT, I don't teach them hands-on. I teach them eyes-on. I always say that you can't treat what you don't see and you can't see what you don't know. So in order for us to really understand what it is that we have to treat, we have to be able to analyze where the movement starts. So I usually teach this in a larger class, in front of a class, and I'll have everyone sit at a desk and I'll say to them, reach for something in front of you, reach for something in back of you, reach for something to the side of you. And as you start reaching away, what's happening? But if all of you, just for a second, whether I can mute you or not, take a pen and put it in front of you and reach for it. And then if you have a larger object like a cup, you can watch me and reach for it. What do you see that's different? You can see that my grasp, I have hand accommodation in space, but how do I know that? I know that because my reach is directed by my vision of what I see. I am already anticipating the weight of my cup. I know it's filled with water. I have that anticipation when I go for grasp. My postural set is there. And if that, I'm not going to use my cup because I'll spill, but if that cup was way beyond my arm's length, I would know that I could move my body towards the pen because I can't make my arm any longer than it is. So in order for us to reach beyond arm's length, we need to be able to weight shift. I don't know if you guys can see me, but we need to be able to weight shift over our hips and reach for the object that is out of our arm's length. So understanding our base of support, understanding our center of gravity, understanding whether the target is moving or not, and where it is in relation to a base of support is where we start. And it's a very easy place to start to practice analyzing initiation and movement. Analyzing gait is not where you're going to start practicing. Analyzing something that's moving really fast is not where you're going to start practicing. Even rolling is hard because there's so many different components. But if you have someone in bench sitting 90-90 and you start playing with reach forward, sideways, backwards, a moving target, different sizes, you can really start to say, where does it start? What do they need to do to get there? And what's blocking them? If the person can't weight shift over their hips, what happens? What do they do? So I recommend, I do this as a lab, or we have in my weekend workshops, and we spend a good 45 minutes on initiation of reach in all different directions with all different planes of movements and all different size objects. Okay, this is a girl that I treat. And this slide was presented for a course in my OT doctorate program. And I was integrating NDT and the PEOP model, which is the person, environment, occupation, performance model. And I was talking about how the environmental constructs and physical constructs affect the efficiency of her reach. I'm going to show you that. I'm going to let you hear it. Kate, please let me know if the sound's not on. And then I'm going to come back and talk to you a little bit about what you see, okay? So here you can just hear me talking. While you hear this, I want you to look at what her base of support is, direction of reach. And even if just do that and where her center of gravity is going.
So I want you to reach all the way over there. So beyond arm's length, since the book is lower, she's going to collapse with her upper trunk, and I'm going to use the environment to be able to facilitate a desired reach. Oops, stop the video for a sec. So I want you to reach all.
Okay, so as you can see, when she's reaching down, her eyes go down, her hands go down, her trunk collapses over her hip. See that? So right away, okay, let me tell you a little bit, Ayara. I apologize. Ayara has spastic athetosis. She is 16 years old. She's dysarthric, not terribly dysarthric, but when she does speak, she goes into extensor tone. She speaks on inhalation. Her legs extend. She tends to go up. She will not, she is as talkative as could be. So she never shuts up. So she's always a little bit in a higher tone position, and she is a social butterfly and is incredibly aware of her disability. She also likes to be a model. So even though she's aware of it, she always asks if she could be the model for my videos or slides or anything like that. So you can see that right here, she is now, her upper trunk is, look at my body, her upper trunk is laterally flexing over her hip, even though her arm's extended. She's laterally flexing. So as soon as you do that, that's it. That's as far as you could go. You've decreased your rate, your degrees of freedom. We're just watching her. Okay, so you see she couldn't get there. So I had to help her now bring her back up. Now we're going to watch, again, this was designed, these videos were designed to just look what happens to the environment. I ended up really liking them because I think it really teaches this point very well. So I've utilized this slide in many of my lectures since.
Just by changing the environment and having her reach up, you can see she doesn't get the collapse of her upper trunk. I'm supporting the weight of her arm.
Okay, so look here. See how you have the elongation of her trunk? And here, you had lateral flexion. I'm supporting the weight of her arm. I'm helping her with her trunk. We cannot expect reach in space when a child can't even really weight shift off that arm yet. they're not going to be able to really direct it. I think we go there too fast, but that's another lecture. So I usually will support the weight of the arm and the trunk as we're reaching up. I don't expect them to have the scapular stabilization or shoulder strength to be able to do that at that far of an end range when we're challenging the postural system as we are. Does that make sense? I'm going to go with that's a yes.
But her trunk stays extended, and that was just by using the environment as an assist to the components that we're looking for. Having stop. Just by changing.
Sorry. Okay. I hope that made sense to you guys. This is Mrs. Bobath. Again, some special slides. Also using the environment, and you can just see she's playing with the ring, but as wherever that object is will dictate where the trunk is and dictate where the hands are and dictate where the head, the vision is. So the vision is going to dictate the head, neck, and trunk alignment. So we really have to keep that in mind as we're treating these kids. Okay. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this. I wanted to give you this as a basic information. I think most of you probably know these concepts, but knowing them and applying them, you know, where to apply them and when, sometimes we forget what tool to take out of which bag. So I just wanted to put this together for you. In order for you to have an active trunk, active postural control, whatever you guys want to call it, if you narrow your base of support, you then get more activity in your trunk. If you widen your base of support, you have less activity in your trunk. So base of support and where your center of gravity is will dictate, it will absolutely dictate how much postural control you need. Like if you're laying down on the floor like this, you don't need much postural control, right? But if you're sitting up, like I'm sitting up on a chair and I have my computer in front of me and it's a small chair, I have a narrow base of support, I'm actively upright. Low tone kids, they are the master. Think of your children with Down syndrome. They are the master of having a large base of support and not putting any demand. So they will sit and play with the toy. They'll either sit like this or they'll W sit, right? And when they rotate, they don't rotate in their trunk to get the toy. They have such laxity in these hips that their trunk just stays as stiff as could be and they could just get whatever they want. And they just have hyper laxity in their hips and in their shoulders. And they're never really getting good postural activation in their trunk. And people will often ask me, well, so what? They're functional. So what? They can do this. So what? And all I think about is this child is going to be a grown-up. And aging bodies are aging bodies. So if you don't provide them with the opportunity to activate and develop good joints and strengthening in their spine, their function is going to decrease at a much younger age than it would their typical counterpart. So that's usually my answer, because kids could do a lot more than they can at 10 than they can when they're 50. Also, base of support provides you with a lot of sensory information. So if you have a narrow base of support and you're shifting your rotated trunk over your femur, you're getting all this information about tactile, what the surface is, proprioception, feeling your body through the joint, and kinesthetic awareness. You're like this, and you're not weight shifting anywhere. You have no idea where your body is in space. So you're not really getting the sensory awareness. We always say, like, they don't have body awareness, they don't have kinesthetic awareness, they don't have safety awareness, they don't know where to put their arms when they're dressing. It kind of all goes together. Okay. I talk about this sometimes, and I don't really have to get into it too much here, but in New York, there was a whole big debate on whether we call tone anymore. And I'm sure it was not just in New York, but it started here very early on in my career. And so this is my answer, because I don't always want to get into a semantics over it when I'm teaching an NDT course. I talk about tone as a passive readiness for muscle to fire. So when you wake up, your alarm goes off, you're going to overshoot, you don't have isolated digital control, you're going to hit that snooze button. Well, now we have iPhones, but when we used to have that, and that would be, you've got a lower readiness state to fire. By Tuesday, 10:30, you got a meeting to go to, you've got a kid to see, you're up, you're running, you're ready. So your muscle fibers are at a ready, an increased readiness state to fire. So children with spasticity, that's neurology, that's velocity dependent. They're always very hyper. Stiffness is what I believe we could change. I believe a lot of our kids that end up very kyphotic and they've got a lot of internal rotation and a lot of head stacking, that's stiffness. Those muscles have ended up staying in a very shortened state. Like think of like black Velcro. And it just takes a lot to be able to like break up those sacromeres and get those a little bit going, a little bit wider. That's what we talk about when we talk about muscle elongation. I visualize just kind of getting those muscle fibers a little bit longer. We're going to talk about that. So I just wanted you to get a sense of how I define these terms so that everyone is on the same page. So we're OTs. And we understand, and speech too, we understand that it's not, you can't just treat a body. It just doesn't work that way, right? So you're going to look at their cognitive feelings. You're going to look at their arousal. You're going to look at their motivation. You're going to look at their emotion, always by mechanical alignment. But if you have a kid who didn't sleep that night and doesn't care about the activity and either has very low or very high cognition and needs a matched activity that's meaningful and is depressed or crying or not engaged, I don't know what you're going to do to get their tone increased, right? Like you got to meet the child where they are. And once we're able to get to that motor system, making sure that they have the biomechanical alignment that they need. I have often worked on kids on balls and bolsters or swings or whatever it is, and not worried so much about what I was getting movement efficiency was, but I was more worried about getting the child engaged in being active in their OT session before I was able to get them. And I always sneak myself in a little bit early anyway. So to increase tone, basically the concept increasing postural tone basically means you're weak or you're low tone. So you're weak, either you had surgery and those muscles are weak, or you're weak in like those kids who are very kyphotic in their trunk and they collapse, but their legs and arms extend. So their trunk is weak, but they have too much extensor tone in their limbs. We need to work them in a narrow base of support. Okay, so we're going to take that child, narrow their base, and shift them slowly. Don't go shifting them all the way. They don't know what to do at that kind of end range. They're going to freak out. They have to feel safe and they have to feel successful. It's that just right challenge, just like it is in every other therapeutic activity that we do. So if this kid's never shifted even this far off of their base of support and I'm bringing their legs together, then I might give them an arm, right? Or I'll be right here. So they know that I've got them. I don't tell them, I'm just right here. And then I'll have them reach for whatever we're batting or playing or whatever our activity is, and I'll bring them back and we'll talk. We're not talking about weight shifting. We're talking, okay, what are we going to do next? Let's see if we could find the red plate. Okay, let's go. Here it is. Oh, wow, it's a little bit further. You think you could get it? Let's see. And I move the ball with them. And I give them successful experiences so that they have the motor memory and aren't so fearful to move off of their base of support while I'm increasing their postural activation. And we know from SI that heavy work also increases postural tone, so we could always incorporate that into our sessions. And for high tone, this is where that whole elongation comes in. When people are talking about stretching, I know a lot of people are fearful of stretching or feel like that's not within our scope of practice, whatever. I'm not fearful of stretching. I don't call it stretching. I call it muscle elongation because I want to get that child to be able to elongate and reach beyond arm's length. And I don't pull at an elbow if it's contracted at all, because then all I'm going to do is increase the tendon length. I start working on whatever muscles are stiff, and they're active. They're doing whatever they're doing. And usually it's not with grasp because I don't want flexion, but whatever we're doing. And I'll start working on increasing that range and increasing that range and increasing the range. And I give them support and I'm holding them so that they can start activating that muscle in an elongated state. If I'm working on bicipital elongation or elongation to open up their pecs, and speech therapists work on this all the time, right? For respiration, we need to really get them open here and have them be able to have good head neck control for biomechanical alignment for feeding and articulation. I'm going to help them do that. I'm not going to then bring them at the table and start working on stringing beads, because that is going to be working in a shortened state and we'll get a rebound. I think, did I just lose you guys? No, okay. So that's sort of the concept of elongation and activation in the elongated state. And that's why I say, I think stiffness is where we could really make a difference, because it's not spasticity. It's not coming from the brain. It's secondary effects of spasticity. So therapeutic handling is what we know about, you know, I'm not going to spend too much time on that because I see we're low on time, but it's really very much a sensory motor approach. Where you put your hands, don't dance. So skilled therapists learn how to place their hands, where to place their hands, and understand the child's sensory system. And if you look here, my hands are in front and in back. I'm rotating her. We're engaged and she feels safe. So she knows that she could go in this position, but she's not going anywhere. She knows, she's trusted my hands. They're firm, they're deep, they're direct, they're towards the surface, and shifting her in the direction of the next movement pattern. Okay, so I don't know, Kate, how much time we have, but I wanted to show you a little bit of a video. And how are we?
We're good. We actually have until 6:20-ish.
Oh, okay. So then if everyone's okay with that, then I will show you these. Just they're short, just like the other ones. What I'd like for you to look at in this video, I think I skipped a slide. So one of the things that we're going to look at as we're looking at these videos is you're going to see me and you're going to see Joan Moore. And she's going to facilitate me from prone prop to sit. So you're going to think about where the base of support is, where your center of gravity is, where I'm initiating my movement. So don't look at hands or heads. Start just looking at the trunk. So look at upper trunk, which is like from your end of your scapula up, and lower trunk and pelvis, which is from the end of your scapula down. Where do you place your hands? Sorry that it says patient. I should change it to client. How is my person responding to touch, and how do I move with my person? So for this video, just look at this and look at the direction of Joan's hands on me to facilitate the weight shift, because that's like the key to NDT. Now let's hope this works, because it didn't last time. Okay. So on the front side, okay, so right there, I'm nowhere, right? I'm halfway in between. She needs to let me, with her hands, know where my next base of support is. Where am I going? Because I'm not typical, right? I've got neuropathology. That's why I'm here. So I know that I'm going to be sitting, but someone else might not have that feedback yet. So if you look at this hand's giving feedback towards the ground, because I know I have to weight shift off of here, my hands. And this hand is giving me weight shift through her forearm towards my hip, and she's going to move out of the way. Always have to move out of the way. Again, she's going down. Let me go back just a little bit. Okay. So now I'm going to be going down. So she has to let me know I'm going to go to the floor. So her weight shift her hand in the back is giving me weight shift towards the floor, and this hand's actually directed me in this direction, so that I know I'm not going into 4-point, I'm not going into quadruped, I'm going down into prone prop, because that's the direction of her facilitation. So did you guys I hope you guys got a sense of that. It's hard for me to tell, but I'm hoping that that gave you a good sense of that's the kind of stuff we do in movement labs when we're teaching the course. Thank you. I like the hands up. So when you're in an NDT course, you're learning on each other because it's important to learn on typical, and that's an entire movement lab. And then we go from there to quadruped, so you could feel the difference of weight shift from all the way down to prone prop to hands and knees. And that's really hard, not as easy as you think. So if you want to play with your other therapists, play that one. Have them go into sitting and then end up in prone prop. Don't tell them, and see if you could get them to switch to quadruped going in the other direction. Never tell them, and you'll see it's not as easy as it looks. It's really not. And it took me, when I was first learning this, it took me a long time, and my key was I had to really look at where I wanted them to end. Where's that weight shift gonna end? What's their next base of support? And that taught me how to move towards that base of support. It's a learned skill. It's a motor learned skill for us too. So this is Yara again. It was the same session, but I started with this. I did reach before in this presentation, but this was just to show you guys. She's going to go from supine to sit. She has athetosis with spasticity and right-sided involvement, and I don't have to say any more.
Yara is going to roll from supine to side lying. So go ahead. Initiating with her upper trunk. Okay. All right, can you swing your legs over to the side of the edge? She can initiate that with her lower trunk. Her right hip is post-surgical, so she has less motion in that right now. Okay, can you push yourself up? Good job. Use this hand to help. Push, push, push. Okay, good job. And now can you fix your legs and press them? And how about this leg? How can I help you? There you go. Okay, now we're going to...
Wait, I'm sorry. So you can see how I said, how can I help you? Because I didn't want, she needs to direct her own care. And once again, using that POP model, they talk a lot about participation, not just occupational performance, but occupational participation. And that really bought into how I've been treating as a pediatric therapist, because I think that everyone talks about independence as do it by yourself. And independence could be independent in directing your care. She's independent in wheelchair mobility. She's not always so independent in wheelchair management. She could be independent in the toilet, even though she needs assistance in a lot, but she could direct her care, and she could talk about what she needs, how she wants to be transferred, when she needs personal assistance for feminine hygiene, how she wants that, all sorts of things. I mean, my goal with Yara is to increase her independence. She will never be able to live alone, but she needs to be able to learn how to direct her care and know how to increase her participation and tell her caregivers, because her caregivers are not going to know what to do. So I stop all the time in the middle of a session, go, I forgot, I don't know what to do. Pretend you don't know me. Pretend I never worked with you before, Yara. What are you going to tell me I need to do? And I practice the script because she's dysarthric. It's easy for me to understand her, but not everybody. She speaks in inhalation, and she gets frustrated. So then everything falls apart. And Maggie probably could talk more about that than I can. So we really need to, the more familiar they are with directing their care, the less anxious they are in doing it. And self-advocacy. I'm all about self-advocacy. But at the end of this very session, and I honestly was thrilled, was look at what she did. She weight shifted over her hip and took her wheelchair, because the wheelchair was out of the way, and she asked me to bring it to her. And I was like, nope. And I took my phone out and I said, I'm gonna take a picture of you doing it. And I had no idea it was gonna look this good. I just figured I'd see what happens. And she put it all together. And she was able to bring that chair and direct the chair and position it in the way she needs to provide a stand pivot transfer. So that was really...
Yara is going to roll.
That's not supposed to happen, I'm sorry. I don't know. Back. Okay. And I think that's it. I think that's, yeah. Okay. So on a personal note, the Bobas did die together in 1991. They always talked about NDT being a living concept. And what I want to share with you is that if anyone tells you that NDT is old-fashioned or that the neurology is no longer current, tell them that they are no longer in touch with the NDT theory and that the NDT theory is as current as its time, because Mrs. Bobath would say it's a living concept. It's going to keep on changing as we increase our knowledge. So this is dynamic, it's alive, it's current. In my references, there's a new book that the NDT put out with all the terminology that explains why what we do clinically works. We didn't change what we do clinically to adapt to the new neurology. The new neurology gives greater depth to what we've been doing. We are not a reflex hierarchical model. The books may say we are. Look at who wrote them. We're not. So I want to thank you very much. And if you have any questions or if you want to hang out, I have typical and atypical slides if you want to practice analyzing, or we could call it a night and do the meet and greet.
Does anyone have any questions? Okay, well, if you have questions later, you can always email me and I will forward them over. We do have one from Van. It says, base of support, center of gravity stands for what term? Could you write it down? Oh, I just said it. Huh? BOS is base of support.
I'm so sorry, yes.
That's okay. And COG is center of gravity. And I will type that in the chat box.
And I will make sure I change that slide. So whoever asked that question, thank you.
Absolutely. But if you have questions when you're reviewing this at another time, please feel free to email me and I will forward them on to Tina. Any last questions?
If you have some typical or atypical slides, I think that would be really useful.
I do. If everyone wants to hang out a little bit, I could show you a couple of them. That's up to you guys.
That'd be great.
I think I have it ready to go.
Okay.
That's right. I have it up and ready. I thought it would be, I find that when I was learning, I found it useful. It's up to you guys. So Kate, you direct that, please. I don't know.
Yeah, if you don't mind, we would love it.
Okay. So give me a second and I will figure out how to share my screen and find the other.
While she's doing that, I wanted to remind you guys that the WFOT call for papers for Paris 2022 is now open, and the call for papers will be open until March 17th. So if you wanted to submit for WFOT, please be getting your materials ready.
I'm going to take a second to find it. It's not ready, and I apologize because I did have it ready, but maybe I closed it out by accident. I'm not sharing anymore, right?
Nope, you're not sharing right now currently.
Okay.
That's okay. I have another announcement. The Swedish Association for Occupational Therapy grant that I emailed out, that grant, the call for papers closes October 31st. So just keep that in mind as well.
Oh, no. Do more upright with you guys. Or do you want to start here? Let's start here. So this is prone prop because we talked a little bit about prone prop during our session. So if you look at this little girl, and I'm going to tell you she has AFOs on, and that already messes her up because when you prone prop and you have AFOs on, it shifts your weight forward. So I'm going to tell you that just so that you know that in your sessions. Don't expect them to be able to do this well if you're in fixed dorsiflexion. And yes, we do have to know about the lower extremities. I'm sorry, guys, but they're attached to the body and you have to know about the lower extremities. I am almost as well versed in the lower extremities as I am the upper extremities, and I wasn't. So they're actually an easier limb to understand. They really are. There's less to know. Okay, so if you look at prone prop, this baby is 3 to 4 months. This little girl is older. I think she was about 3 or 4. She had spastic quadriceps, and look at her muscle definition. 4-year-old should not look that built, right? So that's already telling you something's wrong. That's stiffness. Look at her hands. Now, if you look at her, she's got a wide base of support. But what do you see that's functionally different? Like, because I'm going to be answering these questions, right? So if you look at the visual system, this little girl, she's staring at the mat, right? This little girl is looking at us. These pictures were taken while I was taking the NDT course. My PT friend was pregnant and gave birth, and we just had a ball. So that's how I learned typical development. I learned it this way. We took pictures every single month. So if you're around kids that are typical, that's how you learn. I didn't learn it through a book. So you look through the visual system, head, neck, and trunk alignment. So she already has enough extension in her upper trunk that she could support her shoulder, her elbow, her head, her neck, her eyes, and her mouth. Okay, that's awesome. OTs, we talk about getting weight bearing and weight shifting on the ulnar side of the forearm so that we could start getting radial ulnar dissociation, right? Like that's an OT thing. So we talk about that a lot. So here on the bottom, if you look at this little girl, she's getting that. But that's not active. There's nothing active about that. Look over here. Look at the difference. Look at the fluidity. So she's already shifting her body over her shoulder, over her elbow. Her hand is free. That power side is starting to get ready. It's starting to learn. I have to stabilize so that I can learn prehension. She's 3. She doesn't have that yet. This development is incredible. It puts it all together 2 systems ahead. You're practicing it 2 months before. So it's really it's a beautiful thing to watch. And our kids really do miss out on a lot. So if you look here, this is ring sitting. Again, this, her name's Lynette. I think she's about 30 now. But she was a very low tone baby. So it's still okay. She's typical. This little girl was, I think, 2, maybe 18 months. She had spastic diplegia and she would sacral sit. So this is just sacral sitting means you're sitting on your sacrum. When you're sitting on your sacrum, some people refer to this as a posterior pelvic tilt. So if you posteriorly pelvic tilt, then your shoulders go up, your arms go up, and I always tell this to speech therapists as well, you really can't do any switch activation or anything, any kind of distal oral motor stuff if you're here, because you're now stacking. So at the very least, learn positioning, make sure that the child's in upright alignment. If they're in adaptive position, whatever it is, they have to be sitting over their hips, not on their sacrum. That's what she's doing. She's sitting over her hips. Do you see the difference? So she's free. Her arms are free. Her arms are support. And if you look the back of her legs, no sensory information about what's going on that base of support. None at all. It's like on the edges of her heels, on her sacrum, and on her hands. This little girl, she knows exactly where she is in space. She's got her femurs down, her lower legs down, her tibias down, feet to feet. She's getting all of the sensory information. We need that. This is important for us. If you want to have dynamic sitting, you need to be dynamic in the lower part of your body in order to have the upper part of your body free, right? We need to know this. We can't shy away and say, that's PT. I don't know. I don't think it works that way. I think that we all overlap and work together and treat together as a whole person holistically, with our functional goals being whatever they are that's within our skilled discipline, right? Maggie, you have a question?
Yeah, so Tina, would you, for the child seated in the bottom picture, what would you what would you reposition first for better trunk support to?
Excellent question. So I would not expect her to be able to ring sit, because I'm looking at her and I'm thinking she might not have that range. And if you don't know, so this is now scope of practice. If the hips are not your area of expertise, don't work on increasing range of motion in her hips. Work on being safe and getting the alignment you need. So that is a very excellent question. And I'm hoping I could, well, what I would do is imagine the ball's now the mat, okay? I would shift her over so that she's bench sitting off of the mat. So I would scoot her over. Now her my daughter's so much better at directing the camera. But can you visualize that? So now she's sitting like this over the mat, and you didn't mess with the range at her hips. You're keeping her that narrow. You're just bringing her over. And then what you're going to do is all you need to learn how to do is she's going to be rounded. Just give her a little bit of input upwards in the front, downwards in the back, and keep it there. And help her sit upright. So just give her counter pressure. And then when her head's up, you need a chin tuck. So we could, that's a whole course, but start just bringing her shoulders back. Unround them. While you're here, just start talking to her and bringing her shoulders back. But sometimes if you just shift them over their hips a little bit, that's enough. Not always, depends on the severity of the child. Low tone kids, you could get a little more. It's an excellent question. I wouldn't go for this. Look at how much external, look at how out her hips are, right? How out her knees are.
Right.
That's a lot of range at the hip. She may not have that.
But just from what you demonstrated on the ball there, it's like, look at the environment for learning that opens the child up for. So thank you.
Right. And so I always bench sit. I'm if you see any of my pictures, you'll see me on a ball, on a bolster, on a mat, bench sitting when I'm looking for fine motor control. Depends on what I'm looking for. But if I'm asking for fine motor, and the mouth is fine motor, right? It's even more fine motor than the hands. So when you're looking for that kind of fine motor control, you need the body to be doing what it needs to be doing, because that's a lot. It is. Okay, so that's prone prop. That's ring sit. I don't know if we want to spend time in side sit. I want to do something in sitting. Side sitting is overrated as far as I'm concerned, but what I will tell you is inside sitting, if I'm going to tell you one thing about the slide, is look, he's still sacral sitting. He's still in that posterior pelvic tilt. Big deal. So he's side sitting. So what? He's probably sitting towards his better side, and we're reinforcing. Look at these pecs. Look at these clavicles. Maggie, look at that clavicle. I mean, how's that affecting respiration, right? Look at that head. Look at the mouth, right? So now, here, and I want to tell you something. I used to work with kids this age. My setting now is older. I walked in, and I shouldn't say, I really do mean this. I think we have to say it. I walked into it's moderate to severe. Many are profound. What I noticed was not their equipment, was not their OT stuff, was not every single kid, open mouth posture. They had no tongue-jaw dissociation whatsoever. They had stretched out mandibles. And that means they don't look smart, right? They all look at, that's not true. All it is that they don't have this. Terrible. So I always feel like you got, some of the speech therapists don't like me because they think I'm crossing boundaries, but I'm constantly working on that. And that's just part of pulling it all together. So, I think there's a lot of overlap, and we need to overlap, and we can't divide a child up into speech, OT, and PT. We need to treat the whole child for who they are and where we are, and meet them where they are. Sometimes sometimes I'm doing oral motor because the kid needs that regulation. I didn't plan on it. I planned to go on the swing. Kid had a completely different agenda. Okay, so we want all of this for head, needed for play. We want our kids to be able to play. So here, that's a nice fine motor, right? Nice little grasp, small object in small container. But look at what her body's doing. She's got a chin tuck. Her mouth is together. She's rotated. She's not have rounded shoulders. You don't see her clavicles. She's got dynamic sitting, and she's got fine motor. That's what it takes. So this is sitting balance. This is equilibrium responses. This kid is just looking at mom. She's not that worried. She's on the edge. She's not that worried. This kid has got good judgment. She knows if she's getting shifted back, which she was because someone's testing her sitting balance, she's going to fall. So she knows that, and so does the therapist. The therapist is ready to catch her, right? Mom is too, but look at how far away mom's hands are. Mom's a PT. This is NDT PT person. This is PT person too. Look at the difference of where their hands are, because they know who they're dealing with, right? So functional sitting. So this is what I'm talking about, Maggie. I would take this kid and put him, let me show you what he looks like. That's the same kid. So he had bad surgery. So he used to be really tight. Someone just cut his nerve so that he wouldn't so he wouldn't bring his legs together. And so now then his legs just flopped apart. It was just ridiculous. So he had no mobility. He would just kind of like drag his legs across. He wanted this toy. She wants the toy. See how dynamic? So in order to have exploration of play and learn spatial relations and size of objects and colors and shapes and blah, 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 you need to be able to go get there. Correct? So this little boy, if I wanted him to start working on this, I would go back and he's going to be here. Right? So I'm going to give him that bench sitting that I was talking about. Okay. But I have this slide showing the ATNR. The ATNR is this reflex. And you can see it's normal. This little baby's using it for stability, but you can see how it's being, this looks blocked. It's stiffer. So the things, this is here, you see how far back the arm is. He's tighter. It's not ready to play. And he's back in that sacral set. So it's once again bringing him up so that his hands can come together, have the postural support that this child has, extension, spine over hips. Think spine over hips all the time. Spine over hips, not just shoulders over hips because they might be hyperextending. Spine in their spine over hips, their whole back. Okay, and then you'll get there, and you're not gonna break them. I promise you, you're not gonna break them. So supported standing. Okay, and then this is for my foremist and hand course. But I talk about, and we break out into labs. So we take each slide and we break out into labs and we treat this child to look like that. So this child's squatting, this child's, same child, is in bench sitting, okay? What do you need to do? One is not have the camera so high. That would be the first thing he would say. He was looking at me taking the picture. Yeah. But the other thing is his arms are telling you, nope, I don't have enough control. And where doesn't he have enough control? Down below. So we need our hands to be down below. We need to help him gain that control so that he could free his upper body, his hands, his eyes, and his mouth, Maggie, right? To be able to manipulate his world the way he desires to do so and grow cognitively and emotionally and increase his participation in everything that's meaningful. Now that's it. Did that help?
That was fantastic. Thank you. I really appreciated those positioning slides. Those are great.
Yeah, it helps because unless you see it side to side, it's hard to visualize.
All right. Any last questions? Okay. Oh, go ahead.
I have one more. A lot of our students with moderate to severe impairments also have a visual impairment as well. And you talked about that being like one of the first initiations of the movement. So can you just speak a little bit more about those students, and does that change anything for how that impacts the movement?
Yes, vision impacts everything.
Right.
So and it depends on, what I have noticed is if a child has their eye out, like exotropic or esotropic, that side's usually their more involved side. Not always, but usually it's a good hint. So if you're working on giving more feedback on that side, you're going to know that eye doesn't, those muscles, you can't treat that, Maggie. Those muscles aren't, they're skeletal muscles, they're the same. One's overstretched, either way. So you have to help them see that. You're going to direct both eyes. You're going to help them do biocular vision as much as possible. And you present the object within their focal length of vision. So you have to know what that is. So if their focal length of vision is very, very close, then I'm not going to have them doing something. I'm not having them hit a switch far away. I'm going to have it within their vision. Or I raise things up, like I elevate things so that now the doll and I are in the same vision. If she wants to play with the doll, they don't have to do anything but maintain head, neck, and trunk alignment, and eye gaze is straight ahead. So you are going to decrease the demands of the visual system and increase the demands of the postural system in order to achieve whatever your goal is. you can't increase the demands of all the systems at once.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Excellent questions.
That was great. All right, well, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this. I will send out the recording as soon as I have it.
Thank you, everybody, and hope to see you.